Chad, we thought Brandon Miller would play. He, in fact, did play last night for Alabama against South Carolina, and then he has a season's best for him in a performance where he puts up 40, scores the game-winning basket in overtime, and the storyline builds from what was the last 24 to 48 hours. And there was talk and discussion going up to tip-off in Columbia, where Alabama was facing the worst team in the SEC, and South Carolina took them to overtime, and the ball was in the hands of Alabama's best player, the SEC's best player. Some say NCAA basketball's best player. Greg Byrne spoke before the game with Reese Davis about the fact that had this been someone else other than the star player, would he have or she been able to play in a game?
How do you react? What is your response to that? That there's preferential treatment given because of the season that's going on and because of the level of ability of the player and players involved?
Reese, I think that's a fair narrative that people can immediately go to. And what I have tried to think about this entire time is let's do what we think is right. Let's make sure we are honest. Let's make sure that we cooperate, that we support law enforcement and anybody else out there that needs to be supported through this. And you can control what you can control. I can't control whether somebody immediately goes to that as their thought on this. What I felt is that Brandon needed to be treated fairly, like any other student athlete should be. That's here at the University of Alabama, and that's what's been driving us through that. Whether it was him or whether it was a student athlete on any other team.
Well, and so from there, he uses the word "we" a lot. Not Nate Oats, not Greg Byrne, who's speaking there, the AD, but we, the University of Alabama. And Pete Thamel asked him, okay, exactly what went into gathering the facts from the university standpoint?
Walk us through the university decision-making process for a decision like this. Obviously, it's not a unilateral decision by you. I imagine it touches a lot of people at the University of Alabama. Can you give us some insight into how the decision to play Brandon Miller was made?
So it was ongoing from the get-go when the incident happened. It was a conversation between myself, Nate Oats, conversation with myself and the president. We have legal counsel involved for the university. We have our different offices within the university that are at least aware of it, and so we had normal conversations like we do for other issues, and that information was shared collectively, and collectively we decided that Brandon was able to play.
Chad, he also said that they did not know, he claims at least Byrne didn't know, about the text message that was sent from Miles to Miller about bringing back the gun until it was out in court the other day.
It's all complete BS. The fact that Greg Byrne is saying it's a fair narrative, people that think that he got preferential treatment because he's great at basketball, tells you everything you need to know. That was the one bit of complete honesty I think we heard from Greg Byrne right there. If they didn't know about the text, I mean, that's a poor job by them doing their due diligence. Look, Tuscaloosa police are known across the region for being very cooperative with the University of Alabama. So I don't think that any information they could get about this case or get from Brandon Miller, again, if Brandon Miller is being completely cooperative with the police, which I have no reason to believe he's not, based on everything that's out there, wouldn't he tell his coaches that he got or his lawyer could tell him, he got a text about this when he showed up about bringing the piece, and that piece was used to murder someone? He could have told them that. They could have found out this information a number of different ways. So does that not change anything if you just found out about it? If you're Greg Byrne, they're going to do all of these little mental hurdles and clear them and use all these big words about collectively and we did this and we've done that and we're doing this like we would with any other student athlete. It's complete BS. If this was a bench player on the soccer team, or this was a reserve freshman or sophomore on the football team even, or someone on this basketball team that wasn't Brandon Miller, that guy or that girl is booted from the university and kicked off the team immediately. People are arrested in America all the time for having done less. And I'm not claiming he should be arrested. By the law, he shouldn't be. If he's telling the truth, absolutely he shouldn't be arrested for it. But let's not pretend that anyone is debating the fact that he transported the murder weapon to a murder. Whether knowingly doing it or not, he had it in his vehicle all night. He brought it to the gunman, and someone died that night because of it. Put that on anyone else that's not Brandon Miller level good, and they are removed from an athletic team. I'm not calling for the imprisonment of this young man. I'm not saying he should be arrested or charged, but he's going to face a civil suit at some point. That's going to happen. And at the least, you suspend him for a month, 4 or 5 games. Do something. Alabama continues to do nothing, all in the name of winning. And that's all they're about.
And that's what they did last night. They put the ball in the hands of their best player, and he puts up 41 points. But he's facing, and he will continue to face, chants like this from South Carolina fans. There were fights breaking out in the stands last night between an Alabama fan and South Carolina fan. I mean, we're just getting started on this. The chants, by the way, were lock him up. But Chad, he puts up 41, and he has a stellar performance. But that's what he is. That's what he is. He's a stellar player. You want the ball in his hands late, and they won. Did it in regulation, did it in overtime.
I mean, was there ever any doubt about his ability to dominate a game? I mean, this was...
They played, they were slow out of the gate. South Carolina cut it to a short deficit, but he played like he's been playing the entire time.
Yeah, they were a 17.5-point road favorite. South Carolina has been terrible this year. They're the worst team in the net rankings in the SEC, and if not for Brandon Miller, they lose that game going away. No one else could do anything. The strange part about that game was the guy that's been in the news over-delivered and was terrific and single-handedly won the game, and all of his teammates collapsed last night. Couldn't do anything. Now, is that the weight of all this, the murder on the, with the teammate, and then all this news, is that weighing on the teammates and not Brandon Miller? I don't know, but what I knew and what I saw, they lined up, and that is that Brandon Miller is a terrific basketball talent and the best player in the country, and he showed it last night, and he avoided disaster for Alabama and what would have been a road loss. Was talking with Davey, our producer, before the show. If they're playing at any other SEC team last night outside of South Carolina and maybe one other, Ole Miss maybe, the 2 worst teams in the conference right now, they lose that game. They're lucky they had South Carolina on the road and not someone else, or they're losing. Now, with that chant of lock them up, here's the good news for Alabama on what's left. They got a home game against Arkansas. They've got a home game against Auburn, and they go to Texas A&M, which may be the friendliest fan base in the SEC. They are known for being hospitable and only cheering for their team. It's going to be packed because that could be for the SEC title outright in the regular season. Will Texas A&M fans in a packed house step it up? Because what we saw at South Carolina last night were chants, but as you could hear, you could barely hear it because no one's attending South Carolina basketball games because they're terrible. So they're not really going to face that huge road environment. Example, if this all came out before they played at Tennessee a week ago, how loud are those chants? How nasty is that environment for Brandon Miller there in front of 22,000 people?
What about SEC tournament?
SEC tournament, unless they play Kentucky, is going to be a very neutral. Yeah, Tennessee could have some fans, but it's going to be a neutral environment for the most part. NCAA tournament, depending on matchup and venue, probably a pretty neutral environment for them also. So I don't know that he's going to get it that bad from the crowd because he's not going to see a truly hostile crowd.
Nate Oats, of course, had media availability post-game, and he started his press conference by apologizing for the events of this past Tuesday. And here's a portion of what he had to say.
Quite a game, but before we get into the game, just want to address yesterday's press conference and my response to the Brandon Miller question. I'm not here to make excuses, but I want to make it clear that I didn't have the details from the hearing that morning since I was coming straight from practice. And I used a poor choice of words, making it appear like I wasn't taking this tragic situation seriously, which we have throughout the course of it. I sincerely apologize for that. I know Greg shared some information earlier today on the situation. I don't really have anything more to add other than what he's already said. So.
Start on Zoom with Nick Kelly.
Yeah, Nate, what led the decision for Brandon to play today?
Well, as Greg said earlier, we make decisions based on available facts, and that's what we did here.
So, Chad, both guys, Byrne and Oats, are saying that they didn't know about every detail of what came out in that hearing. After Oats said, yeah, we knew about that in a comment made on Tuesday. If both guys didn't know about the text message that was sent and the fact that Miller brought the gun back to the scene, how could you let him play last night if you just found out about that on Tuesday?
It's a good point, and that's a bit of new information, right? I mean, we assume they knew everything.
Well, it's because Oats said,
along.
yeah, we knew about that. That's how he started the comment whenever he made the comment that wrong place, wrong time.
And then he covered by saying, I was coming off the court and, didn't know that the hearing had happened, and that's why I responded the way I did. Yeah, I mean, that's a new bit of info that would be important if you're trying to make a decision on someone's eligibility or whether or not they're going to participate in athletics. So that's new info, but again, this just goes back to Alabama has just decided that we are going to go full steam ahead. Consequences be damned. Reputation of our athletics program be damned. We are trying to win a national title, and Brandon Miller gives us a chance to do it, so we don't care about what everyone thinks. Now, I shouldn't say they completely don't care because they have spoken. Now, granted, Greg Byrne goes on with Alabama grad Reese Davis in one of his interviews, so it's not like he's going to the most hard-hitting journalist that's going to cover Alabama. Speaking of hard-hitting journalism, the question after that in the press conference, and I was watching it live last night, was from some Alabama writer who said, can you talk about the mental fortitude of Brandon Miller to score 41 tonight and win that game with all the noise around him? And I'm thinking, man, this is a systemic problem with that school. They're not alone. But I do think that they're at the forefront of colleges in a small town where that football, the athletics program, when anyone's doing well, they are fiercely protected by everyone around Alabama, and it's always been that way. Everyone in the
conference, really.
Yeah, and but specifically Bama is way worse than I think almost everywhere else, and how insulated it is, and how people that cover that program cover it. Because I mean, has an Alabama person ever broken bad news, about the Alabama program? We have guys on from VolQuest. They've broken plenty of bad news about Tennessee athletics over the years. Other Knoxville media outlets have broken bad news or, researched bad stories about athletics there. That's just not the case at Alabama. But Hutton, your point is well made about they did get new information. They still did nothing with it.
Well, they're saying that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nate Oats didn't say that, but again, Nate Oats' crutch is, I came off the court, I didn't know the hearing was happening that day, I was thrown off guard by the first question, and I answered it in an insensitive manner, and I apologize. Here's the other thing about Nate Oats. The man does not look sympathetic to anything. I don't know, I'm not going to crush him over because it just could be his demeanor, but he's going to come across poorly every time he speaks because there's something about the tics in his voice and his face as he's talking about it, that he looks dismissive of everything. Even when he's saying that he's not and he's taking it seriously, he has a demeanor and tone about him that seems dismissive about all of this and does not seem overly genuine.
Nervous, extremely nervous.
Well, the first time he wasn't nervous. The first time he was irritated with the question, I thought. That time, I'll give you that. He seemed a little nervous talking about it. You could tell he was also reading notes from his laptop.
Yeah.
When you're watching it live, he kept looking back at talking points of what he wanted to say about it. But they're going to fall back on Greg Byrne. Greg Byrne has done some interviews now, the AD, and he's going to be the one that's going to issue all, official statements on it. But look, What happened last night is no surprise to me. An inferior basketball team in the SEC could not defend the best player in America, who's going to be a top 3 or 4 pick in the NBA draft. And Alabama has reaped the rewards of Brandon Miller ever since that awful night when this happened. And they've done nothing to him. They haven't punished him at all. They will continue to reap the rewards on the court from him. And they are a national championship favorite because of Brandon Miller. And that's what Alabama's concerned about and not much else.
The only person wrong place, wrong time was Jamia Harris, who lost her life at the age of 23 with a young child. And the focus has been on Brandon Miller and whether or not he should be allowed to play, and he shouldn't be. And Bama's allowing him to play and move forward with it. The question is, in a 24-hour news cycle system that we're in, how long does this last? How long does the focus last on this? Because no one was really talking about Darius Miles, right? That wasn't a storyline.
That's a good point.
It was a storyline for a night in Nashville as Alabama beat Vandy, and they had an emotional scene in the locker room post-game. Then it's just been about Alabama being number 1 in the country and then playing Tennessee and everything that's taking place on the court. And now the focus is off the court with Miller on the court and remains there as the top player in the conference. Coming up.
Here's my guess, by the way, Hutton.
Yeah.
This will matter through SEC tournament in Nashville. And once we get to the NCAA tournament, it will mostly go away. It'll be all about, can Alabama win it all? But I do think this lasts. In terms of people on broadcast discussing it, shows like ours talking about it, I think it probably lasts another 2 weeks, through the SEC tournament. And once we get to that Thursday and Friday of the NCAA tournament, it'll go away, and everyone's just going to talk about Brandon Miller, the player, and Alabama, the team.